Now, note that I haven't yet told you what age Felicia Sonmez and her quarreling co-workers are. Why? Because I didn't have to. Because you can't imagine someone my age acting like this in an office. The New York Times just ran an op-ed entitled, "Why Are We Still Governed by Baby Boomers?" This is why. Because too many millennials are overly sensitive, overly fragile, and have no sense of priorities. You know, I'm sure many boomers would love to retire, but they can't. They're like the grandmother who'd much rather be watching Judge Judy, but has to raise her grandkids because her own kids are too fucked up to manage it.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Ayn-Rand Tuesday, August the 22nd, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Stuart-Varney, The Debate, Laura-Ingraham, Retrogrades, The Rape of the Mind, No Free Lunch, Newsmax, Vivek-Ramaswamy, Alex Epstein, Silk, OANN, Bishop-Barron, and Ayn Rand's book. It's part 2 of chapter 11 of her book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
There is no necessary and direct connection between the value of a good and whether or in what quantities labor and other goods of higher order were applied to its production. A non-economic good, a quantity of timber in a virgin forest, for example, does not attain value for men since large quantities of labor or other economic goods were not applied to its production. Whether a diamond was found accidentally or was obtained from a diamond pit with the employment of 1,000 days of labor is completely irrelevant for its value. In general, no one in practical life asks for the history of the origin of a good in estimating its value, but considers solely the services that the good will render him, and which he would have to forego if he did not have it at its command. The quantities of labor or of other means of production applied to its production cannot therefore be the determining factor in the value of a good. Comparison of the value of a good with the value of the means of production employed in its production does, of course, show whether and to what extent its production, an act of past human activity, was appropriate or economic, but the quantities of goods employed in the production of a good have neither a necessary nor a directly determining influence on its value. Karl Menger. I know this is a mouthful of a quote, and from no less than the founder of Austrian economics, but because of the value the defender of free markets must place on price discovery, it is imperative that Marx's labor theory of value be thoroughly debunked in your minds And Menger here has made mincemeat of this pivotal piece of Marxist thought. Goods, and services for that matter, contain value to the degree that they will do good for the user of the good or service. Price signals indicate such a measurement of that value. Marxist machinations of how value is defined lead to a slippery slope that distort everything they touch. Price discovery in free enterprise is instrumental in unpacking value.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now an Ayn Rand quote. Quote, "Nothing can corrupt and disintegrate a culture or a man's character as thoroughly as does the precept of moral agnosticism. The idea that I must never pass moral judgment on others, that I must be morally tolerant of anything, that the good consists of refusing to distinguish good from evil. It is obvious who profits and who loses by such a precept. It is not justice or equal treatment that you grant to me when you abstain equally from praising my virtues and from condemning my vices. When your impartial attitude declares, in effect, that neither the good nor the evil should expect anything from you. Whom do you betray and whom do you encourage?" Unquote. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
Chapter 8, Trial by Trial. For the Special Marine Corps of Inquiry in Washington that had to judge one of the cases of brainwashing, I was asked, as an expert witness, if I could explain why some of the American officers yielded rather easily to mental pressure exerted by the enemy. It was in the days when congressional investigations in our country were in full swing. In all honesty, I had to answer that sometimes coercive suggestions underlying such investigations could exert conforming pressure on susceptible minds. People are conditioned by numerous psychological processes in our daily political atmosphere. Though we have been forewarned of what totalitarian techniques may do to the mind, there is reason to be alarmed by the possible disruption of values brought about by some of our own troubles. The totalitarian dictator succeeded in transforming his apparatus of justice into an instrument of threat and domination. Where once a balanced feeling of justice had been recognized as the noblest ideal of civilized man, this ideal was now scoffed at by cynics like Hitler and Goebbels, and called a synthetic emotion, useful only to impress or appease people. Thus, in the hands of totalitarian inquisitors and judges, justice had become a farce, a piece of propaganda to soothe the people's conscience. Investigative power is misused to arouse prejudices and animosities in those bystanders who have become too confused to distinguish between right and wrong. The totalitarian has taught us that the courts and the judiciary can be used as tools of thought control. That is why we have to study how our own institutions, intentionally and unobtrusively, may be used to distort our concept of democratic freedom. The downfall of justice.
And that was The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, MD. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little bit of Stu-Varney.
Thank you. Trump is not taking part in tomorrow's debate, but RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel warned Trump and says, look, staying away, that's a bad idea, because if he skips, Biden might do the same next year. Charlie Hurt joins us now. Is that a realistic idea? Does Trump skipping tomorrow's debate give Biden an excuse to do the same in 24?
So what a stupid question. What a stupid effing question. And the one thing I've been impressed about this morning is what a dud show. What a crappy show. There's no news that's going on. Donald Trump hasn't been indicted for the fifth time. We don't have Joe Biden falling down the stairs, although they did have a blurb earlier about him getting mildly heckled in Hawaii. So there's really no news. And so this is a really dull, crappy show. And don't be afraid to judge Stuart-Varney or any other right-wing talk show host because they're basically, their first mission is to fill airtime, to get from one commercial to another and fill that airtime. And so if they have to fill it with stupid questions, asking their guests stupid questions, that's what they do. And that's what Varney's doing right here. The other thing is, of course, getting ratings. And so they try to create a controversy out of anything. And if any little thing, they want to create a controversy because controversy sells. And again, goes right back to what I've always said, which is we need nonprofit news. We've got to have nonprofit news. This is crap. We deserve better. And Stuart-Varney is really laying an egg, for lack of a better term. Back in a minute. Thank you. So about former President Trump skipping the debates. Everybody in the media wants him to do the debates. Of course, because especially the people that are putting on the debates. I don't know if it's Fox or ABC or whoever it is that is hosting the debates. They want high ratings, and they know the best possibility of getting high ratings is to have Donald Trump there. So all of them are whining and complaining today, 36 hours ahead of the debate, whining and complaining. The Wall Street Journal just did a piece, according to Stuart-Varney's show, that they describe as a scathing attack on Donald Trump for skipping the debate. And first, I think Donald Trump is perfectly right to skip the debates. He's in the lead. There's nothing. He stands to gain absolutely nothing, and stands to lose a lot by going into a debate. And if he doesn't perform as well as people expect him to, then, and again, he's going to have how many people? 8, 9, 10 people that are going to be cheap-shotting him all night. Who needs it? He's got other things to think about, and I think he's right to do it. But again, because of for-profit news, everybody it skews everybody's judgment. Wall Street Journal wants him to do it not for reasons because like it's good for the American people or it's good for the process, but because it's good for the Wall Street Journal. Then the Wall Street Journal can report on what the antics, so to speak, of former President Trump, and then their circulation numbers will go up. And the same thing with Stuart-Varney and everybody else in the media. They want lots of strong ratings, and that's all they give a damn about in terms of the debates and Donald Trump. They just don't give a damn about anything else. They're greedy people, and the true conservative is not greedy. Greed is not conservative. And they're just greedy people, and it just points up again how badly we need nonprofit news. Nonprofit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. From now a little something from the Ingraham angle.
Now, let's see which the audience likes better. The original that Ms. Ziegler claims is so terrifying and outdated, or the 2024 version oozing with female empowerment?
Okay, so what she's talking about there is Snow White. She's talking about how the left in this country, our enemies, have gone ahead and basically screwed up Snow White, with the help of Disney, of course. And so what you should do here is, instead of putting yourself in this binary position of either go see it or not go see it, and thinking that, well, my conservative bona fides are on the line here, there's a truly conservative way to handle this situation. That is, you want to look at both. Find the old Snow White. See if you can get yourself a DVD copy of the new Snow White, and then play them back to back. Play the old one first, play the new one first, whatever. But play them back to back. And this is the same thing with other movies. If there's whatever Hollywood comes out with, see if you can find, if it's a Western, find an old Western. Watch the old Western, watch the new Western, and see what are the differences, if there is any. Maybe there isn't. But the same thing you can do with Snow White. Watch both versions, see how they differ, and that way you have something to compare it to. And again, you don't have to go into the knee-jerk boycott mode. Okay? You can watch it, but this way also when you're watching it, of course, with your kids, you can discuss it with your kids. What are the differences? And go from there. And again, that was the Laura-Ingraham on the Ingraham angle about Snow White. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Newsmax about the southern border.
He's continuing to lie about the situation at the border. He is continuing to claim that it is not open, but anyone with eyes to see knows that's simply not true. They are also playing a shell game. He has told future illegal aliens stop crossing between the ports of entry and instead use the CBP Mobile One application, make an appointment, and we'll let you in through a port of entry. He'll call that a lawful pathway, but in fact it isn't lawful. These aliens are still inadmissible. They don't have a visa to come here. And so he's lying about this. And unfortunately, too many in Congress are repeating this claim that, yes, the numbers are down, when in fact they are not. He's continuing.
And that was Laura Rees, a former DHS official on Newsmax. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Vivek-Ramaswamy from Russell Brand's show.
Where do you think free speech stands in your country, Vivek, at the moment, and what would you do to address this issue?
Well, in 1776, and in principle, free speech is the most important bedrock principle of the United States. The idea that whoever you are, whatever your views are, whatever your opinions are, you get to express them as long as I get to express mine in return. That was the bargain of the American Revolution. This is a radical idea for most of human history. In old world Europe and in England, it was done the other way. They said that no, the people cannot be trusted to speak their minds. In fact, we, the government, cannot trust the people with the truth. We have to tell them noble lies. And if they criticize us for us, they must be suppressed, because that's what's required to preserve order and structure in a society. In the United States of America in 1776, we fought a revolution to say it's done the other way. I am sad to say, Russell, that that's not the America that I live in today. The America that I live in today is one where the government deputizes private companies to do through the back door what the government could not do through the front door under the Constitution. Indeed, that is why we are unable right now to have this conversation on YouTube. That is pathetic. That is shameful. That is a hollowed out husk of the country that I grew up in. If George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton were walking the streets of this country today, they would not be proud. They would be appalled at seeing a country that looks more like the kingdom they declared independence from than the country they actually set into motion. And you know what my job is? When I leave office in January 2033, right, I'll be 47, 48 years old. Twice the age Thomas Jefferson was, by the way, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. People forget that. My son will be just entering high school. Young Americans will once again be proud of those radical ideals we used to set this country into motion, rather than being ashamed of them. Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington will once again rest in peace. But the only way we're going to get there, the first step we're going to have to take to get there, is to restore the First Amendment itself. And it's in the First Amendment for a reason. We have absolute free speech in this country. There's no opinion that you should not be able to express. That's what absolute free speech means. Doesn't mean you could fraudulently lie to somebody and sell them a product for private gain. Does it mean that you can threaten somebody and then follow through on that threat? No, those aren't opinions. But free speech above all, if it means one thing, it means that all opinions are fair game. And any criticism of the government is also fair game.
And that was Vivek-Ramaswamy on Russell Brand's show. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of Alex Epstein.
Listen, Alex, we hear all of these climate alarmists make all of these predictions, and when they come to pass, when we get to, 2015, 2020, 2023, they don't seem to come to fruition. Why would we believe these people?
I had a similar question when I saw that New York Times story. I'm like, why are you interviewing Al Gore? It's not like this guy had done any research in his life in the first place. And then he has the most popular thing in the world on this, An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, in which he portrayed sea levels as they're going to rise by 20 feet in a few decades. And they're currently rising at a rate of 1 foot a century with extreme model projections of 3 feet a century. So this guy is as wrong as can be. In Fossil Future, I call it being 180 degrees wrong, because he predicts disaster when the world gets better, and yet he's considered credible. I feel like crying. Why don't they actually interview me, who's predicted that these anti-fossil fuel policies would cause a global energy crisis?
Right. He said the same thing that John Kerry did. I think in 2008, 2009, that in 5 years that the Arctic polar ice caps would be melted during the summertime. No, didn't happen. And nobody calls him out on it over and over again.
Yeah, and I think the deep thing, I think people will observe Gore comes across as like a really, really strong or like crazy preacher when he does this, and he really believes in a God of unimpacted nature. So he thinks the planet is perfect without us, and everything we do ruins it, and so he thinks the planet God is punishing us, and that's his whole narrative. And so even when he's totally wrong, he still thinks the planet God is going to punish us tomorrow.
And that was Alex Epstein on Fox News. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Silk from the former duo Diamond and Silk, who is going to be talking about the New York City mayor's plan on housing illegal immigrants.
Let's look at this stupid behind fool up there in New York. This Mayor Adams, I think, Eric Adams, whatever his name is. You open up the door and told the illegals, come on in. It's a sanctuary. Come on in. Now they done overwhelm your black behind, and now you're crying out for help. And then I heard that he's going to go set up something on some island or somewhere that he's setting up for these illegals to be. I can't recall. If any of my moderators, if you got the information, let me know. He's setting up some type of place or space for these illegals to go and be on some island somewhere up there in New York. My deal is, why don't you send their ass back to their country? Send them back to their own country. It's all you got to do. Why would you continue to use American tax dollars now to house them in somebody else's space? He's an idiot. He's an idiot. Yeah. Did somebody say something about Central Park? Okay, no, I don't think it's Central Park. No, he's actually got some island somewhere. Hold on one second. Hey, sweetheart. You trying to, okay, let me know when you find that. I would say Google it. They probably done hit it. What is it? Ellis Island? It's some island. He's bringing them now for them to take and roost off the island in New York there. I hope they go to his house and roost Rikers Island. I believe that's it. No, it's not them islands. No, look, y'all stop confusing me. River Island, I don't know. Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island. I love it. Look, send them over there with Gilligan and them. That's what you do, and let them have that island over there. But don't come over here and have them going to all of these different islands right here where all of these Americans at, and you got these illegals here. Look at Chicago. They up there going off there in Chicago. Because you have all of these illegal aliens they're trying to take over that neighborhood. And I saw them people, I saw them black people there going the hell off and letting them know to the people there, the mayors and the administrators there, if you don't handle it, that they will handle it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to remember, you got gangs up there. No, I don't think it's Rhode Island. But you got gangs up there in Chicago, and their family members live in those neighborhoods. You think they're going to allow somebody that ain't even supposed to be there to come and intimidate and bully their family members? No, that ain't going to happen. Yeah, Rikers Island would be best to house them. That's right, because, no, it's not Fantasy Island. the plane boys. No, look, I said that, and a lot of people on this feed don't even know what I'm talking about. No, it's not Fantasy Island. No, they probably had a fantasy, thought they was going to come here, and be living large and in charge up here off of American tax dollars. They probably had that fantasy, but it turned into a nightmare. No, it's not Martha's Vineyard. Is that considered an island? I guess that's considered an island. But no, this here is what island I thought. But anywho, y'all look it up. Y'all look this stuff up. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. But look, I got to get the... You still can't find it? Okay. All right, hon. Let me know when you find it. But they plan on housing migrants on an island in East River. On an island in East River? They're in New York. Okay, on an island in East River in New York, they plan on housing illegal aliens, all right? Because the hotels done got all full until you got people laying all out in the streets now. So now you got Mayor Adams talking about, I need help. You ignorant fool, you. How you going to invite all these people to your house and you got no place for them to stay? Ignorant ass is what he is. And everyone else that's going along with it, they ignorant too. That's right. Rikers Island is where they should be going to, or back to their own country is where they should be going to. Stop using American tax dollars, wasting American tax dollars on people that ain't even supposed to be here in our country. That's right. Stop using up our resources, our welfare system, for these individuals that's not supposed to be here. When I work and my money go into the system, it's for American citizens, not for illegal aliens. Okay? It's not for illegal aliens. So, shame on all of the officials that's going along with this foolishness, using our American tax dollars to house these people that hadn't even put one red cent into our system. They hadn't even put a penny into our systems, and they getting free food, free housing, free clothes, free rides. While American citizens, homeless American citizens, sleep on concrete on the street. No running water, no bathroom. They boo-booing right there on the streets. But so Eric Adams, you got what you deserve. Hell, invite them all to your house, Eric. That's what you...
And that was Silk from Diamond and Silk, talking about the illegal aliens that are being sent to, apparently the mayor of New York City is going to send the illegal aliens to some island somewhere there in New York, maybe Ellis Island. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, One America News interviews Georgia State Senator Colton Moore.
She obviously has no respect for the United States Constitution. I mean, there's Eighth Amendment violations all over the county jail there. The ACLU reports that half of the inmates have yet to be charged with a crime. Wow. And then meanwhile, she has no respect for the First Amendment, right? Remember, it took 19 days to certify the election in Georgia. Any reasonable person is going to have some questions to be asked. Some of these charges have nothing to do with more than a tweet. Yeah. I mean, no respect for the First Amendment. She's an absolute far left tyrant.
So that was Georgia State Senator who is introducing in the state Senate an impeachment for District Attorney Fani Willis. Back in a minute. Now a little bit of Bishop Robert Barron.
From the time we're little kids, our wills are being shaped and trained. What a good parent does is you teach them what they should want. So we want things because of our nature and our bodies and so on. But then the spiritual teacher is helping people see, no, what you should want is this, to order the will to real goods, real objective values. Ultimately, toward the ultimately right thing, which is God. So that in every act of the will, I'm implicitly desiring God. So even as I get out of bed in the morning and go to work, well, I'm doing that because I want to make money. Why do I want that? Well, to support my family. Why do I want that? Because I love my family. I want them to flourish. Or why do you want that? And you just keep opening up the horizons that surround the will till you finally come to the good itself. What I want is the infinite good, the unconditioned good of God. My point there is Christ becoming Lord of your will means that every particular act of your will is conditioned finally by a desire for Him.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand.
Newspapers are not published by or for theoretical innovators. Journalists do not venture to propagate an outrageous theory unless they know they can refer to some reputable source, able, they hope, to explain the inexplicable and defend the indefensible. An enormous amount of unconscionable nonsense comes out of the academic world each year. Most of it is stillborn. But when echoes of a specific work begin to spurt in the popular press, they acquire significance as an advance warning, as an indication of the fact that some group has a practical interest in shooting these particular bubbles into the country's cultural arteries. In the case of the new egalitarianism, an academic source does exist. It may not be the first book of that kind, but it is the one noticeably touted at present. It is A Theory of Justice by John Rawls, professor of philosophy at Harvard University. The New York Times Book Review, December 3rd, 1972, lists it among 5 significant books of 1972 and explains, although it was published in 1971, it was not widely reviewed until 1972, because critics needed time to get a grip on its complexities. In fact, it may not be properly understood until it has been studied for years. The book review itself did not review it until July 16, 1972, at which time it published a front-page review written by Marshall Cohen, professor of philosophy at the City University of New York. The fact that the timing of that review coincided with the period of George McGovern's campaign may or may not be purely coincidental. Let me say that I have not read and do not intend to read that book, but since one cannot judge a book by its reviews, please regard the following discussion as the review of a review. Mr. Cohen's remarks deserve attention in their own right. According to the review, Rawls is not an egalitarian, for he allows that inequalities of wealth, power, and authority may be just. He argues, however, that these inequalities are just only when they can reasonably be expected to work out to the advantage of those who are worst off. The expenses incurred, by whom? In training a doctor, like the rewards that encourage better performance from an entrepreneur, are permissible only if eliminating them or reducing them further would leave the worse off still. If, however, permitting such inequalities contributes to improving the health or raising the material standards of those who are least advantaged, the inequalities are justified. But they are justified only to that extent, never as rewards for merit, never as the just deserts of those who are born with greater natural advantages or into more favorable social circumstances. I assume that this is an accurate summary of Mr. Rawls' thesis. The book review's plug of December 3rd offers corroboration. The talented or socially advantaged person hasn't earned anything. Those who have been favored by nature, whoever they are, he, Rawls writes, may gain from their good fortune only in terms that improve the situation of those who have lost out. And now, a quote from John Galt analyzing altruism in my book, Atlas Shrugged. It is the parasites who are the moral justification for the existence of the producers, but the existence of the parasites is an end in itself. Certain evils are protected by their own magnitude. There are people who, reading that quotation from Rawls, would not believe that it means what it says, but it does. It is not against social institutions that Mr. Rawls and Mr. Cohen rebels, but against the existence of human talent. Not against political privileges, but against reality. Not against governmental favors, but against nature. Against those who have been favored by nature, as if such a term as favor were applicable here. Not against social injustice, but against metaphysical injustice, against the fact that some men are born with better brains and make better use of them than others are and do. The new theory of justice demands that men counteract the injustice of nature by instituting the most obscenely unthinkable injustice among men. Deprive those favored by nature, i.e. the talented, the intelligent, the creative, of the right to the rewards they produce, i.e. the right to life, and grant to the incompetent, the stupid, the slothful, a right to the effortless enjoyment of the rewards they could not produce, could not imagine, and would not know what to do with. Mr. Cohen would object to my formulation. It is important to understand, he writes, that according to Rawls, it is neither just nor unjust that men are born with different natural abilities into different social positions. These are simple, natural facts. True, but if so, what is the purpose of the next sentence? To be sure, no one deserves his greater natural capacity or merits or more favorable starting point in society. The natural and social lottery is arbitrary from a moral point of view, but it does not follow, as the equalitarian supposes, that we should eliminate these differences. There is another way to deal with them. As we have seen, they can be put to work for the benefit of all, and, in particular, for the benefit of those who are worst off. If a natural fact is neither just nor unjust, by what mental leap does it become a moral problem and an issue of justice? Why should those favored by nature be made to atone for what is not an injustice and is not of their making? Mr. Cohen does not explain. He continues, what justice requires, then, is that natural chance and social fortune be treated as a collective resource and put to work for the common good. Justice does not require equality, but it does require that men share one another's fate. This is the conclusion that required reading a 607-page book and taking a year to get a grip on its complexities. That this is regarded as a new theory raises the question of where Mr. Rawls' readers and admirers have been for the last 2,000 years. There is more than this to the book, but let us pause at this point for a moment. Observe that Mr. Cohen's, And the egalitarian's view of man is literally the view of a child's fairy tale. The notion that man, before birth, is some sort of indeterminate thing, an entity without identity, something like a shapeless chunk of human clay, and that fairy godmothers proceed to grant or deny him various attributes, favors, such as intelligence, talent, beauty, rich parents, etc. These attributes are handed out arbitrarily. This word is preposterously inapplicable to the processes of nature. It is a lottery among pre-embryonic non-entities, and, the supposedly adult mentalities conclude, such a winner could not possibly have deserved his good fortune. A man does not deserve or earn anything after birth as a human being because he acts by means of undeserved, unmerited, unearned attributes. Implication? To earn something means to choose and earn your personal attributes before you exist. Stuff of that kind has a certain value. It is a psychological confession projecting the enormity of that envy and hatred for the man of ability, which are the root of all altruistic theories. By preaching the basest variant of the old altruist tripe, Mr. Rawls' book reveals altruism's ultimate meaning, which may be regarded as an ethical innovation. But A Theory of Justice is not primarily a book on ethics. It is a treatise on politics. And, believe it or not, it might be taken by some people as a way to save capitalism, since Mr. Rawls allegedly offers a new moral justification for the existence of social inequalities. It is fascinating to observe against whom Mr. Rawls' polemic is directed. Against the utilitarians. Virtually all the defenders of capitalism, from the 19th century to the present, accept the ethics of utilitarianism, with its slogan, "The greatest happiness of the greatest number," as their moral base and justification, evading the appalling contradiction between capitalism and the altruist, collectivist nature of the utilitarian ethics. Mr. Cohen points out that utilitarianism is incompatible with justice because it endorses the sacrifice of minorities to the interests of the majority. I said this in 1946. See my old pamphlet, Textbook of Americanism. If the alleged defenders of capitalism insist on clinging to altruism, Mr. Rawls is the retribution they have long since deserved. With far greater consistency than theirs, he substitutes a new standard of ethics for their old utilitarian one. The greatest happiness for the least deserving. His main purpose, however, is to revive, as a moral political base, the theory of social contract, which utilitarianism had replaced. In the opinion of John Rawls, writes Mr. Cohen, the social contract theory of Rousseau and Kant, wouldn't you know it, provides an alternative to utilitarianism. Mr. Cohen proceeds to offer a summary of the way Mr. Rawls would proceed to establish a social contract. Men would be placed in what he calls the original position, which is not a state of nature, but a hypothetical situation that can be entered into at any time. Justice would be ensured by requiring that the principles which are to govern society be chosen behind a veil of ignorance. This veil prevents those who occupy the original position from knowing their own natural abilities or their own positions in the social order. What they do not know, they cannot turn to their own advantage. This ignorance guarantees that their choice will be fair, and since everyone in the original position is assumed to be rational, everyone will be convinced by the same arguments. In the social contract tradition, the choice of political principles is unanimous. No. Mr. Cohen does not explain or define what that original position is, probably with good reason. As he goes on, he seems to hint that hypothetical situation is the state of pre-embryonic human clay. Rawls argues that given the uncertainties that characterize the original position, men do not know whether they are well or ill endowed, rich or poor, and given the fateful nature of the choice to be made, these are the principles by which they will live, rational men would choose according to the maximin rules of game theory. This rule defines a conservative strategy. In making a choice among alternatives, we should choose that alternative whose worst possible outcome is superior to the worst possible outcome of the others. And thus men would rationally choose to accept Mr. Rawls' ethical political principles. Regardless of any Rube Goldberg complexities erected to arrive at that conclusion, I submit that it is impossible for men to make any choice on the basis of ignorance, i.e., using ignorance as a criterion. If men do not know their own identities, they will not be able to grasp such things as principles to live by, alternatives, or what is a good, bad, or worst possible outcome. Since in order to be fair, they must not know what is to their own advantage, how would they be able to know which is the least advantageous, the worst possible outcome? As to the maximin rule of choice, I can annul Mr. Rawls' social contract, which requires unanimity, by saying that in long-range issues, I choose that alternative whose best possible outcome is superior to the best possible outcome of the others. A quote from Atlas Shrugged. You seek escape from pain. We seek the achievement of happiness. You exist for the sake of avoiding punishment. We exist for the sake of earning rewards. Threats will not make us function. Fear is not our incentive. It is not death that we wish to avoid, but life that we wish to live. Mr. Cohen is not in full agreement with Mr. Rawls. He seems to think that Mr. Rawls is not egalitarian enough. One would like to be clearer about the sorts of inequalities that are in fact justified in order to encourage better performance. And is it in fact legitimate for Rawls to exclude considerations of what he calls envy from the calculations that are made in the original position? It is arguable that including them would lead to the choice of more egalitarian principles. Does this mean that pre-embryos without attributes are able to experience envy of other pre-embryos without attributes? Does this mean that a just society must grind its better members down to the level of its worst in order to pander to envy? I am inclined to guess that the answer is affirmative, because Mr. Cohen continues as follows. However that may be, I, for one, am inclined to argue that once an adequate social minimum has been reached, justice requires the elimination of many economic and social inequalities, even if their elimination inhibits further raising of the minimum. Is this motivated by the desire to uplift the weak, or to degrade the strong, to help the incompetent, or to destroy the able? Is this the voice of love or of hatred, of compassion or of envy? What value would be gained by such a cerebricidal atrocity? I ought to forego some economic benefits, says Mr. Cohen, if doing so will reduce the evils of social distance, strengthen communal ties, and enhance the possibilities for a fuller participation in the common life. Whose life? In common with whom? On whose standard of value? The folks next door? The corner louts? The hippies? The drug addicts? A quote from Atlas Shrugged. Dagny, I had seen what it was that I had to fight for. I had to save you, not to let you stumble the years of your life away, struggling on through a poisoned fog, struggling to find, at the end of your road, not the towers of a city, but a fat, soggy, mindless cripple performing his enjoyment of life by means of swallowing the gin your life had gone to pay for. Mr. Cohen mentions that Mr. Rawls rejects the perfectionistic doctrines of Aristotle. Wouldn't you know that? Rawls, by the way, is an American, educated in American universities, but he completed his education in Great Britain at Oxford on a Fulbright fellowship. What is the cause of today's egalitarian trend? For over 200 years, Europe's predominantly altruist, collectivist intellectuals had claimed to be the voice of the people, the champions of the downtrodden, disinherited masses, and of unlimited majority rule. Majority was the omnipotent word of the intellectuals' theology. Majority will and majority welfare were their moral base and political goal, which, they claimed, permitted, vindicated, and justified anything. With varying degrees of consistency, this belief was shared by most of Europe's social thinkers, from Marx to Bentham to John Stuart Mill, whose On Liberty is the most pernicious piece of collectivism ever adopted by suicidal defenders of liberty. In mid-20th century, the intellectuals were traumatized by seeing their axiomatic bedrock disintegrate into thin ice. The concept of majority will collapsed when they saw that the majority was not with them and did not share their ideals. The concept of majority welfare collapsed when they discovered, through the experiences of communist Russia, Nazi Germany, welfare state England, and sundry lesser socialist regimes, that only their hated adversary, the free, selfish, individualistic system of capitalism, is able to benefit the majority of the people, in fact, all of the people.
And that was part 2 of Chapter 11 of Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand. And again, the point of this book is to let everybody know that you're a philosopher. It's not whether or not you're a philosopher. Of course you're a philosopher. The question is, what philosophical theories are you following? Are you following ones that are helping you to be a happy person or not? Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.